He's getting married on Saturday. And he's here. So he's really super dedicated to be here. I think his fiance is at the airport right now picking up relatives and in the midst of all. So I just want to say a super big extra thank you because you're here.
I'm also marrying into the family. She's a Microsoft.
And I didn't know that. That's cool.
So if any of the Microsoft folks know Janine Silas, I'm the guy she's been talking about. So yeah, I'm. Do we have Kensho users here? People know Kensho. We are a provider of campaign management solutions for paid search, paid social, and that kind of thing. I've been with the company for about 2 years as the director of marketing research. Just kind of getting my feet wet on the speaking circuit, so I don't do things like put my Twitter handle on slides yet. But if you got the Jump the Shark reference, you'll get my Twitter handle is not Abbott, because I'm not Abbott, I'm Costello. So who's on first? I occasionally, I own the domain. I get emails from people who think I'm some kind of anti-Abbott Labs crusader, which is really hilarious, but that's not the case. So, we can talk about the title of this. Where should you invest your next marketing dollar? And what this really is about is some strategic applications of forecasting within your campaign management tools. Specifically, what we want to talk about is this concept of marginal ROI. So what is that? We know what ROI looks like in normal circumstances. It's just your revenue divided by your spending. It's the overall number that tells you if you're doing well, doing poorly, whatever. But if marginal ROI, what we're doing here is just looking at taking your current state of spending and looking what happens with the increase in revenue for that next dollar of spending. So this is an example here where you look at the curve and you see at point A there's a certain amount of change in your x-axis and a certain amount of change in your y-axis that shows how much you're getting for that next dollar. So for example, if I increase my spending from $80,000 to $100,000 for my monthly search budget, let's say, and my forecasting tools tell me that my revenue goes up from $200,000 to $230,000. Then you've got $30,000 in new revenue over $20,000 in new sales. You have a marginal ROI of 1.5. Now this then zooms that in, so you can kind of see where those points move on the chart. So now if that sounds familiar, if it sounds like the rate of change of your y variable compared to the rate of change of your x variable, that's calculus. That's actually taking the derivative of the slope of the curve at a particular point of spending. And so if you think about that from a campaign spending and forecasting environment, then you can look at, for example, 2 different publishers. And these are then 2 different forecasting curves for different publishers in your campaign. And you look at publisher A, which is kind of the greenish line on the bottom. Overall, your ROI is, the whole curve is lower than the other one. So you'd say, okay, that one is not as lucrative as publisher B. But if you consider that your spending on publisher A is denoted by the square, and your spending on publisher B is the circle, if you take the slope of that line, it's a steeper slope on publisher A. So the next dollar you spend is actually going to have a higher incremental return. At that point, you get a little more bang for your buck if you went publisher B instead, or publisher A instead of publisher B. And taking this, there are 2 different ways you can kind of build this out. That one looked at 2 different lines, one for each publisher. There's a more basic way you can do it, where you take a single forecast, you throw everything into your forecasting tool, but then, for example, you may have Bing will be spending at a certain point on that curve, another publisher will be at a different point in that curve, and you can look at the difference between the 2. Or you can separate it out. If you take your, all of your Bing spend and forecast that separately, and all of your redacted spend and put it in another one, then you get 2 different slopes. And then you can see kind of how that works. The first one, if you look at that, the heavy line there, let's say Bing has a 5.9 incremental ROI, and with everything in that same bucket, maybe Google's at 4.8. So again, Bing would have a slight advantage on investing that next dollar. Maybe AdMob is down here. You've got Facebook up there as well. But then the other way to look at it is if you put each one into its own curve, then you have that other curve there up along the top, and here's some unknown new publisher that we didn't know about. And that's totally on a separate curve, totally has a separate slope, and you can compare them that way as well. And then just to zoom in on what those two curves look like again. You can have, say, multiple points on a single line or individual points on multiple lines. So that brings us to what we partnered with Bing on for this particular project, and they asked us to look at this kind of analysis as a way to understand the spending potential. You know, there's a kind of a common sense notion or consensus opinion that, you know, some clients may be underinvesting in Bing. So how do we measure that, and how do we actually make that case that's going on, so we can encourage advertisers to balance out their spending? So we looked across 9 paid search programs that had the conditions to make it simple to analyze, specifically that they were set up that we could forecast them separately. And so then that empowered us to use that second approach for looking at marginal ROI with a separate curve for each publisher. So then what did we find? In 5 of the 9 cases, we saw that it would make the most sense for the marketer to invest their next dollar on Bing. 3 cases showed that the dollar could have been better spent elsewhere. And the last case showed no clear winner in the scenario. And if you just think of kind of the dynamics of the paid search market, this makes sense. You know, on balance, Bing is a little more underinvested, perhaps under-optimized. A lot of marketers will spend a lot of time and energy wringing all they can out of the big dog in the room, and then perhaps secondarily get to Bing programs. And we're just kind of trying to quantify when you want to work that back into balance. So it's a little over 50% of the time. You can see here just visually how that breaks out with the 9 cases we looked at. The one in the middle is the one that was kind of a tie, and you know the margin of the percent difference in marginal ROI from the overall average from the program to Bing is what is being measured on the axis here. So the bars going up are where Bing has an advantage, the bars going down. So the key here is that with this more broad-based portfolio approach to forecasting, it helps you kind of tease out which publishers are doing what, where you can kind of squeeze out that additional upside potential. And then by looking at the marginal ROI individually, you can compare the value of incremental spending with those different publishers. Again, you can do it if you just throw it all in a bucket, but this gives you a bit more granularity, a bit more resolution to what's going on. And this is important because there are always more channels. You know, we see that now with Gemini coming in. We see that with social, particularly when Instagram is coming into the picture, and Twitter advertising, and Pinterest, that having this understanding of how all the levers work will help you as a marketer, you know, be more agile and be more nimble to respond to what's going on in your particular campaign. And then finally, when we looked at that with regard to primary paid search publishers, we found, you know, clear incremental opportunities to spend on Bing to, you know, help get that caught up, if you will, on the ROI curve. Because if you think about it, if you've got a curve that way and your spending point is further along the left, you kind of keep pushing it. Eventually, it may flatten out, and you'll see a diminishing, you know, the point of diminishing returns. What we're really doing here is we are looking at the point of diminishing returns for each of these forecasting curves and figuring out where you can kind of move up that scale most effectively. And that's kind of our value prop. You know, there's not a lot in here about like who's Kenshu and why is that important, but we love Bing. We love these guys. They will tell you, hey, here are your opportunities to invest with us. And that's good. But what we can do as a third party is we can give a broader context to that. We can say, okay, we're looking across everything, and here's the differential, you know, the incremental opportunities of one over the other. And that's only going to get more complicated. So that's kind of the spiel on how we view forecasting at Kenshu, and then furthermore, how you can leverage that. Because it's one thing to just say, okay, we're going to spend this much, we'll get this much back, but this is then taking that a step deeper, you know, using math and calculus. I was actually going back and forth with our research folks, and it dawned on me that that's what they were doing. And so yeah, that is marginal ROI like a boss.
Thank you, Greg. You guys thought they'd never use calculus in their job when they were taking that in school. I thought thank you so much. I'll take questions, and while I'm taking questions, Eric Couch is going to come up and get his laptop set up, and he's going to get a mic right up here.